Welcome, everyone, to another episode of What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by Regions. One of the things that our company has studied in the past is the mid-career doldrums. About 20 years in, people tend to get bored with what they've done. And it's not universal. I have many friends that are 20 years into the same job and they love it still. But there's quite a few of us, and I'm raising my hand here, you can't see me, that say after about 20 years, the job begins to get a little boring. The big wins that you've had in the past just simply don't mean as much anymore. The sales or the whatever the big achievements are, they don't quicken your pulse like they once did. The mid-career doldrums tend to strike in the mid-40s. And it's quite a few of my friends, and this is not a perfect sample size because they're my friends and they're all somewhat similar, let's face it, have made some surprising career changes recently. I remember not long ago at a social event, standing in a crowd of guys, all of us about the same age, shoulder to shoulder, circled up, talking about what's going on. There were 5 of us, and 3 of them had changed jobs recently, gone to do something completely different. They still had a core expertise, and now they were applying their core expertise to something different. One of them was a banker, and he'd gone from the traditional branch banking model into something that was purely online and electronic, and he was loving it. And I said, why did you choose to make this change? He said, man, I was bored. I'd been doing the same thing for years. The mid-career doldrums. There are those out there, and I've met a handful of them. I seek them out now because they all have good stories, who have changed the focus of their work, who have changed the focus of their livelihood, who've done something hugely different. And I asked them all the same question. Would you do it again? Do you regret it? Were you afraid? This series of questions that, frankly, maybe I'm searching for something. And I ask them these questions, and every one of them, every single one of them say, yeah, it's the best decision I've ever made. I got to be in this workplace for another 20 years or whatever it may be. And it's the best decision I've ever made. It's stimulated me. Our show today is going to talk about mid-career changes, how to deal with the midlife, mid-career doldrums, the boredom of repetition of the same job, and what it takes to make a significant career change. And I'm not talking only resume content here. I'm not talking about how to get the attention of a headhunter. I'm talking about the internal fortitude, the guts, the moment that you swallow hard and you raise your hand and say, I've had enough. I'm 20 years in and I've had enough. It's time to make a career move. And that is a tough thing to do. There aren't many of us that have the guts to do so. We're going to talk to a woman who's done it. You've probably seen her. You've probably heard of her. She went from a very lucrative and predictable career, raised her hand and said, I want something different, and is now a national TV personality. Her name is Jill Schlesinger. I'll tell you a little bit more about her when we come back to What's Working, brought to you by Regions. I'm Cam Marston.
Think about how people really see you. The kid at the drive-thru just sees a coffee drinker.
Please go forward.
Your local barista sees the person who loves a smiley face in their latte.
See you next time.
It's kind of the same way with insurance. Other insurance companies just see a customer, but a State Farm agent sees more. They see you as a neighbor. Your State Farm agent is here to get to know who you really are, so they can help life go right.
Call me, State Farm agent Allison Horner, in Mobile at 666-1616.
Even if we don't meet in person, Regions is still here for you. We make it easier for you to stay informed and in control with online and mobile banking. You can check balances, transfer money, pay bills, deposit checks with Regions Mobile Deposit, and even set up helpful alerts no matter where you are. We're here to make it easier to bank your way. Learn more at regions.com/tools. Regions Bank, member FDIC.
The best, most cost-efficient ways to talk to customers about who you are and what you do is through signs, simple, effective signs. Hi, I'm Cam Marston, host of What's Working. Signorama is the Mobile area's leader in helping you design and build signs advertising your business. What kinds? All kinds of signs, all kinds. Find Signorama on Facebook or at signorama-mobile.com. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by Regions. Today we're talking about mid-career doldrums. And I know there are people that are listening that know exactly what I'm talking about. It's usually 20 years in and we're looking for something else to do. So the question is, if they're coming, if I'm experiencing them, and my thinking includes, it's time for me to make a big switch. It's time for me to find a new job, a new career, go somewhere else, pick up and move, whatever it may be. What are the processes that a normal person needs to go through to determine if this is a good decision? Because it's a weighty decision. It's one that doesn't just impact you, it impacts your family, if you're married and with children, whatever it may be. So it's a big decision. Another angle to take on this thing, which we'll talk about after the break, is what is the employer's obligation to prevent any sort of mid-career doldrum? I have a friend whose employer, after 6 years, grants them, I think it's a 4-week sabbatical, and pays for some of it, allows them to go for 4 weeks on top of vacation to go explore and keep them refreshed and invigorated in their job. Jill Schlesinger is who we'll meet momentarily. Jill is most recognizable as an on-television personality with CBS. And I met her at an event in Washington, D.C., where I was the presenter and she was the MC of the program. I remember being impressed with the way she controlled the event, standing up on stage, recapping the previous speakers, tying them into the upcoming speakers, keeping everything on track, and thinking, this woman knows what she's doing. And I met her. We shook hands, and we had an easy conversation, one of those connections you make where everything seems so easy. And I asked her, how have you gotten into television? How long have you been in TV? She said, well, it's not been all that long. Jill's got a great story. She did not start out with the goal of becoming a television person. She wound up there by making not one, but a couple of mid-career changes that have landed her on her feet. She's an intelligent woman. She's going to lead us through some of the processes that she went through to determine that a mid-career change worked for her and the decisions that she had to make along the way to make sure that it would work out. Jill is a powerful woman, impressive. I like her a lot. We'll meet her in a little bit just after the break. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by Regions, and we want to hear from you. Contact us via Facebook, What's Working with Cam Marston, Twitter, What's Working Cam, email cam@cammarston.com, or by phone or text 251-260-8100. We'll have Jill Schlesinger with a focus on mid-career changes and how to beat the mid-career doldrums when we're back. This is Cam Marston, host of What's Working. Jim Mitchell and his team at Signorama have provided all types of signage for nearly every event I've been a part of for years. I know his team's creativity, their multitude of products, and how easy they are to work with. His No Mistake Signorama is South Alabama's marketplace leader. Find Signorama on Facebook, call 634-0100, or visit next to Mullinex Ford on Airport Boulevard.
I'm Matt Armbruster with Ransom Ministries. We help people in our community that most others have given up on. Please donate your unwanted electronics to Ransom Recycling. We teach life skills, job readiness, and job creation through our electronic recycling program. We take anything with a cord. Find us at ransomministries.com, or you can call us at 251-751-0044.
Department spend countless hours on insurance billing mistakes, Obamacare rules, and compliance. Employee benefits serve the purpose of recruiting, retaining, and rewarding employees. We can handle all of your benefit needs with cost-effective products, employee enrollments, and benefit admin doesn't have to be complicated. My name is Michael Cowart Jr. of the Cowart Group, and we specialize in helping businesses with their employee benefit packages. Visit CowartAssociates.com.
You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by Regions. Our focus is workplace and workforce trends, and I want to hear what you're thinking about today's show. You can contact us on Facebook, What's Working with Cam Marston. Leave me a message there. via Twitter at What's Working Cam. We've got no apostrophe in our Twitter feed. I don't think Twitter allows that. And by email, cam@cammarston.com. Finally, phone or text, the age-old Paleolithic Stone Age manner, 251-260-8100. Again, 251-260-8100. Jill Schlesinger is on the line. I met Jill at a Fidelity event years ago. We struck up an easy conversation. She is a woman that has made a mid-career change, and it has landed her on national TV with a lot going on. Jill, welcome to the program.
Oh, wonderful to be with you.
Tell us what drove your mid-career change. Were you going through the doldrums that so many of my colleagues and I seem to have hit about their 20th year in, and what got you to change, and what did you do to make it so successful?
Well, it's interesting. I am not one of those people who is the architect of my career. I really do believe that the successes that I've had have to do more with my ability to just be really open to trying new things and not to get locked down. So going back 100 years, my first job out of college, I was a commodities options trader on Wall Street. And that was a bit of a sort of a family business for me. My dad was a trader on the floor of the American Stock Exchange. My godfather was a trader on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. So, my high school summer jobs were essentially commuting to New York City from the suburbs. The deal was that my father or my uncle would hire me, and in return, I would be the driver into the city so that they could read the paper. and so I did very rudimentary things. And when I graduated from college, I was actually weighing maybe going into either broadcasting or finance, because I was an intern in college for a local television station, and I had flirted with radio and been on air a little bit, but really I fancied myself a future sports producer. That's what I really thought I wanted to do. But honestly, I was unwilling to do what I thought really had to be done, which is you have to be willing to come out of college to get into broadcasting and just go anywhere. And I really didn't think that was going to be for me. So I went to Wall Street. I was a trader. I did it for about 4 years and made a lot of money, but not life-changing money.
Right.
And found myself really struggling with the idea that, in my 20s, somehow or other, I guess I thought I would love this career so much. I had been around it. I knew what it entailed, and I wasn't really that happy. And so my dad, bless his heart, and now, who died almost 5 years ago, at the time, he really thought that while I didn't work for him and his firm at the time, he thought that I would naturally follow into his firm. But he was very kind, and he said, I think you should rethink this, that this is a job that you really have to, decide. Do you like making money a lot? Do you like having flexible hours? Because there's not a lot more in the job. You're not taking companies public. You're not advising companies like you do, Cam.
Yeah.
But I guess I thought I'd like making money a lot more than I did. And so I really just said, I'm going to take a break. And I took a break, and I did a few different odd jobs, and ended up back where in the town where I had graduated from college, Providence, Rhode Island. And I had met a bunch of different people and said, it's these odd jobs. I don't know. I got to figure out what I want to do with my life. And I had met somebody who owned a financial planning and investment firm. And he said, I think you'd be great doing this. And I said, well, all right. I don't really know what that means, but okay. And I did that. And his line to me, which was always very funny, was, I walked in and I acted like an owner.
Oh, interesting.
Because yeah, again, I was in my 20s, but I worked for myself when I worked for a company when I first got out of college, and then ended up just buying my own seat on the floor of the commodities exchange and trading for myself. And I kind of liked working for myself.
Right.
So when I walked into this company, I think I sort of acted like I was an owner, and I worked very hard. And a year later, the two managing partners of the firm asked me to buy in, and I said, okay, what the hell? Why not?
Yeah.
And that's what I did that. So Look, this is a classic business. This is the 90s, and what you really needed to do was figure out how you're going to get people in the door. It was like a pipeline business. You had to bring people in who trusted you, who thought you were smart enough to help them plan their financial lives and be able to help them manage their goals and objectives and invest their money and buy insurance for them. And so we did that. And a few years into the mission, I went to the president of the company, and I said, oh, gosh, we've got to come up with a new way to bring people in. It's just so hard to cold call.
Right.
And he said, well, what idea do you have? I said, I think that we should there's a guy on the radio. He seems to be making a lot of money doing this. We should do that. I called friends of mine in town who I knew ran radio stations and ended up saying, well, if there's ever a chance to be on the radio, my partner and I would like to do it. And essentially, we didn't really do much of that, and maybe like 6 months later, the guy who ran one of the big radio stations in town called me up and said, well, we just got into a fight with the financial guy who's on the air. Do you and your partner want to come in and audition? And we did that. So long story short is that over the course of my 14 years managing this firm and being the chief investment officer and the chief marketing officer, I started really understanding the power of media to move people, to connect with people. And when I was doing radio, it then turned into television. And as I said, from New York originally, and I was going back and forth to New York, and some producers said to me, well, I know people in New York, and I was starting to appear on some cable outlets like Fox, then later Fox Business News and CNN, and essentially just was using the media as a way to drive business to my firm.
Right.
And, financial crisis hits, and CBS producers were watching me on the air sort of early on, maybe early 2008, right around almost exactly 10 years ago, because it was right when Bear Stearns was going belly up.
Right.
And they said, are you in New York? We'd like to interview you. They started interviewing me and using me in some of their pieces. And as the financial crisis accelerated into the fall, they had me on the air quite a bit. And I had sold the financial planning firm, but was in a contract and working out of sort of a 5 or 6 year contract. And by the beginning of 2009, CBS had been using me quite a bit, and I really wanted out of the business, and I wanted to try to accelerate my exit from the firm and move back home to New York. My parents are getting older, and life just really was more in New York than in New England. And I didn't know what to do. I was sort of up in the air and saying, I guess I'll go work with a New York financial firm. I got to get out of Providence. And someone from CBS called me up in February of 2009 and said, we're launching a new website. It's devoted to financial stuff and money. Would you come in and talk to us? I went in and I interviewed. I said, I didn't really interview. I said, well, I understand. What are you trying to do? We're trying to build something here where we can be a resource for the whole broadcast, both radio and TV, also online. And we really don't want to hire someone who's a TV person. We want to hire someone who's a finance person who understands this stuff but can do the media.
Right.
And, what's a funny thing is that in that very moment, I said to them, I don't really want a job. I don't. I'm exhausted. I've been running my own firm for 14 years. It's a 24/7 job, and I just need a break. And they said, okay, well, just come meet with a bunch of people and we'll talk about it. And 3 weeks later, I signed a contract and started working for CBS. So, which is a long way of telling you that there are very interesting ways that my career intersects with these two things called media and finance.
Yeah.
And what I always loved about using media was that it allowed you to disseminate information that, I thought was important and connect with people in a way that they couldn't get a sense of you. They couldn't get a sense of who you were without hearing your voice or seeing your face. And in the beginning, it was a really much easier way to start closing business because
Right.
people came in understanding who you were. And flipping it on the other side, that when I'm on the air now, because I've had those client experiences and I really do understand how most people process financial information and how to get through to them, those two careers have been able to feed off one another. And so I worked for CBS as an employee for 3 or 4 years. And then I basically said to them, I really want to do I don't love this employee thing. I want to do other stuff. And so I negotiated a deal where I would still work for them, but that I could still pursue things on the side. And so that is where I am today, which is I have this crazy career that's built around serving CBS news in the organization, but also pursuing other things like my own radio show and my own podcast, writing columns and speaking engagements, as well as now writing a book.
Yes, I'm eager for your book, and I'm happy for that success. Here's something I didn't hear you say, Jill. You wanted to be happy. You wanted a new challenge. You were bored, which is so much of what my colleagues in these mid-career doldrums are going through. You seem to have just been able to react to opportunities that were thrown in front of you. Would you agree?
Yeah, I don't think I was bored. I think that for many of us who come up through sales, that, I started my whole career in terms of analysis. And I don't think that I wanted to be the kind of financial person who would sit in a corner and run spreadsheets and come up with the best valuation for a company. So I knew I didn't want to be an analyst. I thought I wanted to be a trader. The trader part is almost instant analysis. And when I went into sales, I think that what became really clear to me is that, like a doctor, you had to be able to work with people about this most intimate thing in their lives, right?
Yeah.
Like either your health or your financial life. And there was a bit of a burden in doing that. I mean, it's an honor to do it, but it really took a lot out of me emotionally. And I think the one thing that I wasn't very good at in the client advisor relationship is that I would really get so upset when a client would not take my advice, not because I wanted to make a sale, but because I felt like, oh my God, this couple is putting themselves at risk.
Yeah.
Or, I'm telling Cam he needs disability insurance, but he won't buy it. And
Right.
what if something bad happened? And it would really plague me.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
what I would say is that I was a little burnt out on that experience, and that only when I stopped doing it did I realize how burnt out I was.
Well, I think there are probably people listening in their car, coming home from work late, early, whatever it may be, working on the weekends, who have had the thought of, I need to make a change. I've had enough. And I wonder if there aren't some questions that you could pose that you could give us, that someone would ask themselves to determine if it's time to make a change and what the opportunities are. These mid-career doldrums are very real, and we need a filter to run them through to figure out where we are. Let's talk about that when we come back from the break. If anybody's interested in the show, it's available via podcast. You can listen again, forward to friends and colleagues. You can find it at cammarston.com. That's CAMMARSTON.com. Across the top of the page is the podcast link. Click, and you're off to the races. Folks, you're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. This is brought to you by Regions. We'll be back with Jill Schlesinger in just a minute.
Life insurance is one of those subjects that make people want to change the subject rather than admit they probably don't have enough. I'm State Farm agent Allison Horner, and that's why I focus on how the benefits of life insurance actually live on by asking people to think in terms of life without having to sell the house insurance, or life without having to give up college insurance. Find out how the benefits of life insurance can live on for your family. Call me, State Farm agent Allison Horner, and get to a better state with State Farm.
That's the sound of rush hour. Hello, recess. Mom! Work from home is a lot of work. Even though we're a little further apart right now, we're still in this together. Regions is donating this ad to local food banks to shine a light on them as they feed our neighbors in need. Learn how you can help or get help at regions.com/foodbank. Regions Bank, member FDIC.
I'm David Nelson, brewmaster and owner of Braided River Brewing. We want beer that goes along no matter where the adventure takes us and that doesn't make us choose between great beer and drinkability. We're drawn to the Delta and united by beer because to us, the best way to celebrate the Delta is to slow down and savor the moments and the beer together. Come visit our tap room in downtown Mobile and ask for us at your favorite bar or restaurant. Visit online at braidedriverbrewing.com.
We're back. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by Regions. If you want to weigh in, contact us. We keep an eye on our Facebook feed, What's Working with Cam Marston. Our Twitter feed, What's Working Cam. By email, cam, C-A-M, at cammarston.com, or by phone or text, 251-260-8100. Again, 251-260-8100. Jill, I'm 20 years into my career. I've worked for XYZ company. And something you mentioned in that previous segment that stood out to me is the roots you had in a family industry, a family business. And there's a lot of that across the country, family business. So let's say, for the purpose of argument, I also have roots or a connection to a family business. But you know what? I've been doing it for 20 years. The things that used to excite me about the job no longer excite me. I make a big sale and I'm no longer stimulated by it. I win a customer or solve a problem, whatever it may be. And the thought has entered my head, I wonder if it's time for a change, or I'd be happier somewhere else. Give us some questions that maybe you asked yourself that helped you determine that it was ready for a change.
I'm a certified financial planner, and so I will always lead with some of those questions first. And I think that when you're contemplating a shift in your life, any kind of shift, I do think it's incredibly helpful to say, am I financially prepared to do this? Look, it really depends what you're thinking. If you're working in a family business and you've got the security / annoyance of being around your family members, there are probably some much larger issues, like how am I really going to extract myself, and what steps do I need to take to talk to my family members, and do I need to bring in an outside business advisor or consultant to help with the transformation. But for many people, the first place to start is, let me just look at my financial plan. And if you don't have one, this would be a great time to do it. And the reason I think that's important is that many people who make these changes, that you have to accept that a lot of the changes might result in a lower level of income for a period of time.
Yeah.
Are you willing to do that? And do you have the wherewithal that you and your family to make this transition? And, it really is different. If you are the sole wage earner in your family, that burden could be very intense, right? It really is. But obviously if you're single, it's much easier. It's like, okay, I can take care of myself. That's fine. But if you're thinking about making a transition, be realistic about, okay, how much money could I really reasonably expect to earn in year 1, 2, 3? Will this derail my family's finances? And if so, what can I do while I'm still working to explore these things that I'm interested in? I hate those stories where I hear them on my radio show. I have people who call in on my radio show and my podcast, and they'll say, well, I just quit my job and I opened up my bed and breakfast. And then a year later, I hear that they're broke.
Yeah.
So, that's not smart either, and can really have terrible repercussions. So can you financially afford this? I think that's number one.
Yeah. Well, go ahead,
Joe. What I would say is that, you really need to have a year of your expenses that's stocked away in the bank.
Yeah.
That's what you want to do. You got to have that. And that would, in excess of probably having just sort of like a nice emergency reserve fund anyway. You just want to be prepared to do this.
Yeah. So as you're going through your career, is it reasonable to expect, let's say I'm 10 years into a career, that in 10 years on, I'm going to be bored with this job. I'm going to be going through these mid-career doldrums, and I need to be setting money aside for this transition, whatever it may be?
I don't know if in 10 years you need to do that. Because I am a very boring and wimpy investment advisor, what I would say is, if you're the kind of person who does get bored easily, recognize that in yourself. And in addition to saving for retirement and being diligent about that and paying your bills on time, set up a little slush fund that's not your Disney World fund for the family, but it's the Cam and Jill preserving my career options in the future fund.
Right.
Because I just think people end up feeling trapped often when it becomes like they are shackled to a job. And you're shackled to a job because you're living a life that requires a certain amount of income, and then you don't feel like you have choices.
Right.
I do think that in this day and age, what's also kind of cool is that there are a lot of ways to explore these other businesses and feelings of like, I'd like to try something. And doing that, you can do it on the side. You can be a consultant. You can kind of open up a shingle on the side and do the thing that you might think could be interesting to you. And, I know the kids call it a side hustle.
A side hustle.
Side hustle. We used to call it part-time work.
Right.
And I think that, for someone like me, the cool part was that I was using this thing I was interested in called media in the business that didn't traditionally use that access. So I was really able to explore it. So maybe you work for a big company and you're in the sales team, but you really think you'd love to write, and you say to the PR department at your company, like, gosh, I'd love to explore with you some of the stuff that you write, or there's a technical aspect of writing that you're really good at. Maybe it's something that you say, go into other parts of the company. I always think that, the first area to really look at is there something I can do in the company where I am?
Yeah.
That would be able to exploit some of that desire.
Yeah. I want to, it makes a prudent decision. It is a prudent decision to get your quote unquote career change to happen within your own company. You don't lose as much momentum there. Perhaps you even gain momentum by doing so. Most of my listeners are going to be small business owners, managers, supervisors, from 5 to 100 employees. That's the world that we cater to. And that opportunity may not exist. One of the things that stood out to me in your story was the amount of contacts you had. And I can only suspect that you didn't meet all these people with the purpose of knowing someday you would ring them up again with the hopes of a new career, or you developed a network that you were able to capitalize on down the road. Tell me about that.
I think that has been one of the wonderful parts of my career is that I naturally am a voyeur. I'm very interested in other people, and I am also interested in connections. And I think this concept of networking is somewhat overstated. Networking is really about building relationships, and most of us know how to build relationships. Do you know how to nurture those relationships? Do you know that clicking up and connecting with someone on LinkedIn is different than saying to somebody, gee, I see that you're doing this thing. Can I help you?
Yeah. Because
in my world, in terms of when I was an advisor, I would hear stories of people, and they would say that, God, my kid needs a job, and I'd say, oh, let me see if I can help you out. And
right.
And if you're naturally inclined to be the type of person who would like to help and pay it forward, that will often come back to you in spades. And in just the minute moments where you just start to connect with somebody, what will you do to further along that process? And I interviewed a woman on my podcast who she really was interesting. She sort of came from an investment banking background, and she told this great story about how she had interviewed for a job and she didn't get the job, but she stayed in touch with the person who interviewed her because she felt like, God, this person's so interesting.
Right.
And flash forward, 20 years, this person came to her and said, hey, I'm looking at, selling my company, and I'd like to hire you and your firm. You were always so impressive, and I loved how we kept in touch, and I think that you might be helpful. And she landed this huge client. And she landed that client because that person knew her. She had stayed in touch with that person. And it's not like you're a nudge and you say, like, I'm not going to take no for an answer. It's like, I'm connecting with you. What can I do to learn more about what you do? How can I help you?
Yeah.
And that, I think, is really a key in my life, that I have always felt like if I can sort of serve the people that have really done right by me and vice versa, sometimes you just do it not thinking anything could possibly happen with that, but you just do it because you're like, oh, this person's cool. I'd like to do that for them.
Well, let's talk about you transforming from a financial advisor, from a CFP. Well, I think you still are a CFP, in fact. But
I am. I'm never giving that up. It was too hard to pass.
There you go. But you had to, you showed up at somebody's doorstep, hypothetically saying, I'm no longer that, I am now this. Or you know me as that, but I now want to be this. Did you feel like that you lost credibility by suddenly changing hats with these people that you were now going to be recognized in a different way?
You know what? I think that my career trajectory made sense to people, so it wasn't that far-fetched to say that here is a person who used to give personalized financial advice and now is doing the same thing, but it's just doing that in front of a camera. I think that when I first started at CBS, I had the desire to be seen as someone who could report on big stories. Right. And so I didn't want to be, I was very sensitive about feeling like I don't want to be just personal finance. I want to do more than that. Because what I found out from the financial crisis is that one of the reasons why CBS was attracted to me was that I was able to distill very complicated stories in a way that people could understand them. And so the people that I could communicate with, these were not people who were watching CNBC. They were network news listeners and viewers who essentially just really could connect with the fact that I'm a good storyteller and I could make it realistic for them. Mm-hmm. So what I think was a challenge for me was how to balance those two desires, right? How am I going to balance saying I want to be the person who is seen as like this credible person about the economy, about a business story, and also giving personal financial advice. And I think that it was heavier on, I think because of my timing where I began when there was like a horrible recession, right, and there was so much going on that I felt like I protested too much with CBS. They were like, okay, yeah, I know, just like tell the story, man. Like we get it. And they didn't really want the personal finance stuff because nobody had time or energy to be thinking about personal finance when they felt like the economy was falling off the rails. So that was more about me. I didn't have to convince anyone but myself that I could do both.
Yeah. Huh. What's the biggest surprise? We're about to go into break, but real quick, what is the biggest surprise as you look back on your career? The biggest surprise that's happened to you in terms of the different changes?
I am known as the happiest person who walks into the CBS Broadcast Center on West 57th Street. I am still titillated and excited by the idea that I get to be around incredibly bright people who trust my judgment as to what is an important financial story and what is not. And so my biggest surprise is that 9 years after I started, I am still just absolutely delighted, and I walk with a great skip in my step when I walk into that building because I feel quite fortunate. And I'm also surprised at how much I really do love telling people about what is so important to them. I mean, in essence, I get to talk about the thing I love. I have great passion for it, and I have a huge microphone and megaphone by working at CBS. And I guess the other part is, although I don't make as much money as I did previously, because the financial services business, you make a lot more money, I'm still sometimes surprised that I just don't care.
Let's pick it up there and see if that's a trend we should explore as we think about career changes. This is What's Working with Cam Marston. We'll be back after the break.
Do you sometimes wonder about different money topics, but struggle to find the answers? The Every Dollar Counts podcast with Gulf Coast experts Josh Knoll and Jay Stubbs is made for those folks serious about their financial plan and looking for answers. Josh and Jay dedicate their time to explaining the various services and products available as well as discussing lifestyle and money interests of the modern-day family. Tune in to Every Dollar Counts on Apple Podcasts and everywhere else you get your favorite podcasts.
The best, most cost-efficient ways to talk to customers about who you are and what you do is through signs, simple, effective signs. Hi, I'm Cam Marston, host of What's Working. Signorama is the Mobile area's leader in helping you design and build signs advertising your business. What kinds? All kinds of signs, all kinds. Find Signorama on Facebook or at signorama-mobile.com.
Do you have a plan to protect your income if you can't work? We'd all like to believe that we'll never be disabled, but the reality is it could happen to you. And if it does, will your income be protected, your family be cared for? Richard Otts has served the Gulf Coast since 1997. If you'd like more information about disability insurance, contact Richard 251-342-8917. That's 251-342-8917.
You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is presented by Regions. We've got Jill Schlesinger on the line. Jill made a major career change. It landed her on CBS. She's a personality that if you've watched TV, you've likely seen Jill. She's got books. She's got podcasts. She's got a ton going on. Jill, I'm curious if, I think whenever I go to work in New York, and it doesn't happen nearly as much as I wish it did, but I fly into New York City, I land in LaGuardia, and I think this is where the best come to play. This is where the best, if you're a designer, a clothing designer, you go to New York. You go to London or New York, but I think New York. If you're in finance, New York is where the best operate. If you're an actor, you go to New York. If you're a television, whatever it may be, I always land in LaGuardia excited, thinking I'm at the elite level by being in this city. Then you walk into CBS studios, as you do on every day, and there are the best in the business there as well. Do you find that the people that are now your colleagues, that are your peers, have also gone through these transformations just like you have, multiple careers which have landed them in these, remarkable positions, elite positions in front of the nation?
Most of my colleagues who are just so talented and wonderful storytellers are career journalists. And what they find is they may gravitate towards different kinds of things. And let me give you a great example. When I first came into CBS, I came in through a guy named Anthony Mason, who is an Emmy Award-winning journalist. He, at the time, was I think his title was Chief Business or Economics Correspondent. He had spent years in the Moscow bureau. He really thought he was going to be the guy who was going to go and, travel around the world, cover different things, but he worked abroad. It was really what he thought his passion was going to be. And at some point, I guess that he sort of was like, hard to raise a family in Moscow. I got to figure out what I want to do next. And so when CBS said to him, hey, would you like to come back and do the business beat? He was sort of said me? Right. Okay. And so that became a real different moment for him. And he did that for a while. And as I said, this guy told unbelievable stories through the financial crisis. He was just amazing. And what he also was doing is that, he was a national correspondent doing other stuff on the side. And he had this great passion for music. And so CBS has a wonderful show on Sunday mornings called CBS Sunday Morning. Yeah. And he went to the executive producer there and said, hey, I love this story about this particular musician. And he would say, would you mind, could I possibly do a story about this person? And he has now kind of morphed his career and now no longer doing the business and economics beat. He is an anchor for our Saturday morning show, and he does these great long-form pieces about musicians. And I always tease him. I said, this is really just the chance for you to get rid of your suit jacket and put on a leather jacket to interview these really cool people.
Right.
But, I think that that's more of the, much more common in terms of what people at who are broadcast journalists do. But, look, this is a field that's evolving, and, a lot of my colleagues have left broadcast news. They've gone into digital. They've done different things. They're exploring new mediums, and they are really happy. I know a couple of people who left broadcast. I just sat next to one yesterday who said, she was on the air for many years, and now she's an author. And she went out and said, I know how to write. How am I going to do this? Wrote some short stories on the side, kind of worked her way up, and then went out and actually wrote a book. So, in my world, what's different is that, journalism, which is completely under siege and a crazy business right now, these people are so passionate. And on one hand, they've got a wonderful, wonderful skill set. On the other hand, they don't necessarily want to leave the field. They just feel like the field is changing so fast. They've got to be able to work they really want to try to figure out a way to survive.
Well, let's talk about it from the employer point of view. It sounds like CBS, and perhaps there are other employers out there that you're aware of, recognize the need for their talent to stretch, to do something different, to prevent them from going into the mid-career doldrums. Do you feel like there are employers, or CBS in particular right now, that recognizes the need to keep their people stimulated? Because I'm certain there are employers listening to this show right now saying, you know what, I've got Joe. He's my chief salesman. I can't imagine him doing anything else. I need a chief salesman. He's the guy. He's been doing it for 15 years. That's what he needs to do. No stretch.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think that happens as much at CBS because I think that it's just the nature of news is just all encompassing. It just swallows you whole every single day. I think that my relationship to that around that would be like around businesses where what I know is like the best CEOs of mid, small, even startups that I've spoken to are the people who really understand that retaining really good people is incredibly important. I interviewed this woman named Elena Botello. She wrote a book called The CEO Next Door, and she's a consultant. And she's a former McKinsey consultant who now does a lot of work. And she took a database and she tried to figure out, hey, what are the traits of successful CEOs? And she looked at that and co-wrote this book. And what's interesting about that is that, the CEO next door is the CEO who literally says, I've got someone great. I totally get the feeling this person's not happy and is willing to say, why are you unhappy? What can we do to keep you? And I think if you're getting that sense that people are unhappy or even not, that you want to have a way to communicate with people, maybe it's just a series of questions. Like, if you aren't in your current job, what's the job you'd want here?
Right.
Maybe that's a way to start and open the conversation. If you weren't doing what you're doing, Cam, what would you be doing?
Right.
What do you imagine that to be? And let people get creative. And, another thing that I find really fascinating is that the successful leaders are not afraid of soliciting advice. One woman I just interviewed, she wrote a book called Thinking in Bets. Her name is Annie Duke. She was the first woman to win the World Series of Poker. And when she goes and talks to companies, she says, what happens is you don't have a lot of information all the time. You don't have all of the information. So what can you do as a leader in a small company or a big company to get that information? And sometimes it literally is just asking questions. And I love this question that she posed. Say you've got a group like 5 people, and you say, okay, if we're going to fail, what's going to bring us down? Like, it's a year from now, we have not done what we were going to do. Think about what would have derailed us, which is a different way of thinking. It's sort of breaking groupthink. It's instead of saying, here's how we're going to succeed, it's asking, what would happen? And one CEO got a great blind comment, which was, the person said the CEO is going to get bored and leave the company.
Oh, interesting.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a question that anybody who's considering a career change could ask themselves. I want to do this, and if it fails, what may cause it to fail? And what
will be the beginning of my failure? What will cause me not to succeed?
Right.
I know.
Right.
I hate to be. Before we got on the air, we were talking about carrots and sticks, but I think that being honest with yourself is really key to being happy at the job you have. Because oftentimes when I talk to a career coach, for example, and I'll say, tell me about your process, it sounds like they're shrinks.
Yeah.
Because often what they're really asking people is, why are you unhappy? And it's not about work. Sometimes it's about something completely unrelated.
Yeah. Yeah. So the career change may be a Band-Aid, but it's not solving the problem.
Well, I think that it's the closest approximation of how, like, how can I make something concrete that feels like I'm doing something different? Maybe I don't want to leave my wife or my husband. That seems very severe. So let me change my career.
Right.
And so what do I have? Do I have a job that's like really robbing me of a lifestyle that I want? Do I have a job that is, not fulfilling? It's fulfilling to me, but it's actually really bad for my family. What can I do? I mean, these are harder questions.
Yes, they are. They are. And it's an interesting line of thought that my boredom may be a symptom of something else that's the true problem.
That's right.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, as we close up the show here, any advice, final thoughts for people that are considering a change of career, change of plan? You've given some great questions to ask financially, great thoughts about internal things that may be the root of the problem. Anything else that you can leave us with?
I think that be very careful about trying to micromanage your career. I think the best thing you can do is to make real connections and to be open to opportunities. And many of us get very nervous when we're presented with something and it's outside of our comfort zone. Be willing to just try it.
Yeah.
And be willing to, a very senior executive woman at a big Wall Street bank said to me that the best thing that she ever realized was that taking a lateral move to work for somebody you like a lot better is totally worth it.
Oh, yeah.
So don't think that any move you have to make is going straight up. Sometimes you have to go to the side. Sometimes you zig and zag. Be open.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think as I look back on some of the changes I've made, I've been asked to do things that I was not comfortable with, but I thought that's the reason to do it. And you get on the other side of it, find some comfort in it, and you're able to offer new things to new clients, which stimulates you for a little bit further down the road. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Jill, thank you so much for your time. I wish you the best of luck. Tell us a little bit about the book and when we can expect to see it.
Oh, my gosh. Not till next year. But
okay.
If you want to check out some of my stuff, you can go to my website, jillonmoney.com. And my podcast is there. It's called Better Off. My radio show may be airing in your marketplace. It's called Jill on Money. And the key to everything in my life is having a producer who keeps my website up to date.
Yeah, I need me one of those. of those. Thanks very much, Jill.
A pleasure.
You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working? Presented by Regions. Everybody, the program is available as a podcast. Go to cammarston.com. You'll look across the top of the screen. You'll see the podcast link. Click it, and you're off to the races. I want to thank Jill once again. We'll have another show next week focusing on workplace and workforce trends that are changing what it is that we do. Thanks very much, and we'll talk to you again next week.